Welcome everyone. This is it's everybody's job building a culture of accessibility talk. So if you are in the wrong room, I don't think that you are. My name is Erin White. I've linked the slides here on the intro slide. We've got the QR code and then the URL is is.gd/NEDCamp 2025 A11Y. And the presentation has like links embedded and things like that. And I'll also have the code again at the end if you want to wait till then. So a little bit about me, where I'm coming from. Longtime web maker since the late 1900s. I've been making websites, as the youth say. Spent the first chunk of my career in higher ed and libraries, which was great. Had a great time. And then I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm done here. Now I'm in civic tech. And I've been working on a large federal level website that will not be named. And I'm not an accessibility specialist. Welcome, y'all. I'm not an accessibility specialist. That's not my job title. My job title is information architect. So this is my first ever talk about web accessibility, and I'm really excited about that. A little bit nervous. It's my second Drupal camp. I live around the corner. And I actually don't use Drupal with my job. Big fan, but it's not something that I use every day. Hopefully this is something that you can take the concepts and apply them no matter what CMS you're using. And the dog in the picture is Blu-ray. She's a COVID pup. She has no boundaries, and we love her very much. So here's what we'll talk about today. I want to offer some framing opinions, some strongly held, some spicy, and it'll sort of give you an idea of where I'm coming from in talking about accessibility practice. Talk about how we make accessibility a value that we share in our organizations. And then I'll get into brass tacks, how we might embed it across our design processes, across our learning communities, and then like on a more technical side, like once you're moving into code, how do you build in accessibility at that point too. So welcome your questions along the way. I'll also be using accessibility and A11Y interchangeably throughout the presentation. This is probably not news for a lot of you, but that's just a shorthand for accessibility that saves some space and means the same thing. Okay. Framing opinions. This is the fun part. First one is it's not too late. So, as I said, I started making websites in 1998, late 1900s. And I got my first job doing web design full-time in 2009. And at the time, I was like learning about UX, and I was doing more like front-end web development. By 2016, I'd stuck around my workplace long enough to get a couple promotions and was leading a team and setting digital strategy. And at that time, we had one person on the team who they were our accessibility specialist. They were the one person. They knew all the things. They did it. That was great. It wasn't until I left higher ed and moved into civic tech that I realized I had really just been paying lip service to accessibility all those years. And so I have a lot of regrets. I regret that I've offloaded all that work onto one person who at the time was really excited about it. But in hindsight, it really pushed a lot of the work to the code phase of what we were doing. And we weren't really thinking about accessibility throughout our entire process. So we were really thinking about it in terms of compliance. So it's not too late. I've only been in the game for 2 years. So I'm excited to be here talking about accessibility for the first time in front of other people, in front of friends. So on that note, I'll say I'm not an expert. And you don't have to be an expert. I firmly believe that you really have to suck at something to get better at it. And I've sucked at a lot of things over the past 27 years of making websites. And I'm going to continue to not be great at everything. But if you don't have something to learn, what are you even doing? Are you okay? Are you alive? I think expertise, if people claim expertise as well, it's always kind of a red flag for me. Oh, you're an expert, huh? Let's talk about that. What is an expert? I'll also note that perfection is not a goal, and it's also impossible. I think admitting that we can't get something entirely perfect, even if we think we've got something perfect, it's never going to be perfect forever. So admitting that from the jump is a superpower, and it also allows us to sort of open our minds and pursue improvement without worrying about trying to get things perfect. And having a viewpoint where you're learning from failure, not seeing failure as like a personal thing that is wrong with you as a human, but rather something that you can learn from is really crucial. Not just for accessibility, but just in general. I'll also offer a note on WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If you know anything about accessibility, you've heard of it, at least, you've at the very least heard of it. My strongly held opinion is that it is extremely important. We need these guidelines very much to help guide our work. And these guidelines can also lead to an approach that is more about box ticking, making sure that we're just like checking things off of the list. It can also lead to siloing of information because it's a pretty complex set of guidelines. There's a lot of information there. And it can also lead to gatekeeping where people, or a lower barrier or higher barrier to entry where people may think that it's harder to get into accessibility work because you have to know and memorize and understand every single thing about WCAG. But my opinion is you don't have to memorize it to do good work. You should have somebody around who knows it pretty well, though. Okay, next one. You can have a completely compliant product that is accessible to assistive technologies, but that is inaccessible to the humans who are using it. I have a very specific example that I'm happy to share at the end of the talk. That is, oh, it sounds like y'all are interested in that. Okay, ask me about it at the end. So it can be technically accessible, legible to a screen reader, announced properly, all those things. But as a human user, you're just like, what the hell is this? And as we all know, retrofitted accessibility is more expensive. It's actually less usable because it's sort of tacked on at the end. And it's also more error prone and brittle. So as we try to maintain products that have accessibility sort of tacked on at the end, it becomes even harder to keep them alive. Final one is overlays don't work. There's a great resource, overlay.sheet.com. We see a lot of organizations using accessibility overlays as a way for individual users to, when they visit a website, they can interact with the accessibility overlay and set their own preferences for how they want the site to work. Just like any other vendor tool that's sold as an add-on after the fact, it's just not effective. Apologies to any North Carolina people in the room. Don't think we have many. The state motto for North Carolina is Esse quam videre, which means to be rather than to see. But overlays are more about seeming rather than being. They may also give organizations the appearance of caring a lot about accessibility without actually having to do much about it. Also, I understand why organizations may go after them because we've got Title II regulations coming up for some organizations. People are really scared about being sued. So this seems like an opportunity to put something, at least try to put something on top of an interface that maybe wasn't designed accessibly in the first place. So say no. This is my new favorite Slack emoji at work. It's the spray bottle with the no. I'm kidding now. It's bigger. So good. Okay, those are all the spicy opinions. All right, let's keep rolling. Okay, so how do we make accessibility a value? So we've got our standard accessibility arguments. We're familiar with these. There's the appeal to morality. It's just the right thing to do. Just good for everyone. Just the right thing to do. There's the carrot, which is, hey, if you design it accessibly for folks who are using assistive technologies, it'll be more accessible to everyone. I hear that one a lot. That's the carrot. Then there's the stick. Title II, compliance, we don't want to get our asses sued, et cetera, et cetera. We need to follow the law. This final one I've kind of been workshopping a little bit. I'm not quite sure if it's baked yet, but this is something that is true within my current work environment, which is that it's just something we do. It's a statement of truth. It's just what we do here. So it no longer becomes an argument, rather it becomes this is just what we do. So what causes what we do here? Like, what are the parts of what we do here? I wanted to talk a little bit about policy versus culture, because the culture is in the title of this talk. So I'll be focusing mostly on the culture side of this, but on the policy side, that tends to be more top-down, thinking about regulations coming down, compliance, bureaucratic enforcement. It's either folks have it built into their job descriptions that they make sure that these things happen. This may be part of written policy for your organization. Tends to be harder to change and more rigid. And of course, there are consequences for noncompliance with policy, varying levels. Similarly, there are policies for noncompliance with culture, but they look different. So culture tends to be more bottom up. I don't think I've ever worked anywhere where culture came from the top down. If anybody has an example of that, I would love to hear it, but it really does tend to come from people in the organization developing how we do things around here, and shared meaning around what's important and how we do things. So it tends to be more informal, fluid, and it's less about policies and procedures and more about processes and day-to-day interactions. And ultimately, the line between the two is not super sharp. There's some blurriness there, and they inform each other. So policy relies on executives, admins, leadership to say that things are important, to follow that up with actions, to put their money where their mouth is, to fund things, so to provide funding for training, software, staff, time to learn. It also may apply to what they reward, how they're writing performance evaluations, what is considered important. So key metrics, or ways that we're evaluating program efficiency or effectiveness. And then, of course, policy. So execs set policy. So policy needs execs and culture needs us, the rest of us. So how do we do it? First, I'll talk about learning community. And this is, again, a lot of this stuff is specific to my current work context, and I'm really excited to share it with you because I think it's a really cool way to do things. And also your mileage is going to vary depending on your organization. First thing that is needed is a shared beginner's mindset. And this is a more broad description of this is a psychologically safe workplace where it's okay to make mistakes and to learn. And that's a much bigger thing to do. And I'm not even going to start talking about psychological safety today. Beyond that, but having a shared approach to learning, being open to new things, being open to not being right all the time. Again, no experts, no perfection, just sharing in the journey. Most of us weren't born learning about how to create accessible web experiences, shockingly. And even people who know a lot about it always admit they have more to learn. We ask 8 practitioners a question, you'll get 8 different answers and strongly held opinions, which is why we love accessibility practitioners. And so you may have different folks in different spots in their path along their journey in accessibility in your organization, which is great. You need people at every level. So you may have your practitioners, the people who know WCAG top to bottom, who can offer very specific answers to questions about accessibility, or who may be leaders in your organization around accessibility learning or things like that. One thing we do at my current organization is an accessibility champions program, and this is kind of popular across many different industries, where it's a self-guided learning process. The link in this deck is to the Intuit Champions program, but there's so many. Civic Actions has a great toolkit, etc. So the goal there is for people who are new to it to be able to move through a stepped learning program on their own, and then to be able to interact with others who are doing the same. So it can be self-paced. It's not necessarily like a full day workshop all at once. It's just something that they can do as they have time. And then that helps people build up their confidence in being able to talk about accessibility at their own pace. So you may have other learners, people who are curious, who want to keep in touch and understand what's new in the field, but who maybe aren't champions yet. And then you have supporters, people who may be less involved day to day in the products you're working on, but who are nevertheless helping make the wheels turn in terms of administrative support for your accessibility work, helping with funding, helping people get what they need to do their work. So the goal here is to lower the barrier to entry and make it easy to engage at each level and to talk with others who are learning as well. The other thing that we do that I find is really it's helpful for us is to have a few different types of spaces around accessibility, rather than just one like accessibility. Here's our channel in Slack about accessibility, which is just like that's too much. And this may be Slack channels, Teams channels. It may be office hours, meetups, synchronous conversations. But it's good to have a few different types of channels. One for the folks who are learning or who just like want to get the latest updates on whatever accessibility article came out, or if there's a free conference happening, because there's so many free accessibility conferences happening all the time. Like I just saw another one announced like 2 days ago. It's all online and it's all free. So sharing resources there. And then there's a more like working like help QA channel for people being like, oh, I'm trying to design this interaction. I need to understand what HTML element I should probably use here to help reduce cognitive load or things like that. So really, people having a place to go, a non-judgmental space to ask questions about the things they're working on, or to get another set of eyes, or whatever. It's much more focused on help me do the thing. And then depending on the size of your organization and how many practitioners you have, you may want to back channel just for the practitioners who are doing accessibility most of the time, as a way to share information about trends you're seeing, as a way to make decisions about if there are organizational accessibility initiatives you want to move forward, or just to let off steam because accessibility work can be tough. Swapping cookie recipes is also acceptable. Okay, so that was learning community stuff. Let's talk about design processes, which I'd love to talk about. So what do you do before you even start moving things around in Figma or whatever tool we're using for our wireframing and prototyping? Think in terms of flows. So I'm an information architect also, so this is like my jam. But I'm giving you a few examples. So this is an example high-level flow of an appointment scheduling tool. Some of the things you might see in a flow include entry points, how people get into the tool or the page, like where they're coming from, what might they be motivated by, what might some of their, what might be like going on in their world while that's happening. And then thinking rather than in terms of screens, thinking in terms of tasks. So, okay, what's the next step? What information does the user need to provide here? Do they need to make a decision here? Do things branch? And just really thinking through each decision flow and if there are potentials for something beyond the happy path. Like, is there potential here, like at this decision point, could it be the person might not have enough information to proceed? Do we need to require this question? Things like that. So really thinking about how people are moving through the product without thinking about pixels on the screen. So the benefits of this, and this is a little bit of a wall of text, I apologize. Flows help you think high level about the product, what it needs to do, who it's doing that thing for, and what the tasks look like, rather than focusing specifically on visual design right away. It also helps you think about those, not necessarily edge cases, but just non-happy paths or non-like typical use cases that really need to be accounted for. Identify potential dead ends, places where people might get stuck, ways to help people get unstuck or find another path if they need to. And it also just provides a nice 30,000 foot view of what you're trying to do, so you can come back to it later when you're in the middle of some like nitty gritty design problem and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? You're able to zoom back out and be like, oh, okay, I need to actually not do this at all. I need to do something entirely different, and it'll still help me do the thing that I'm trying to do. Mobile first design. By designing mobile first, we also account for folks who are using super duper Zoom on their desktop computers. So screenshots here are of my former employer, Virginia Commonwealth University, their site on my mobile device, and then blown up to 400% on my desktop computer. It's the same picture. literally, it's the same thing. So by designing mobile first, we not only are automatically able to account for folks who are using browsers in, but we're also making decisions about what's the most important thing on this page. What am I trying to help people do? What's the linear order of things that need to happen here? Is it okay if people don't make it all the way to the bottom of this page? And it really forces that sort of decision making about the most important thing and then the second most important thing, as well as how people are going to scan through your page. How are we going to chunk the information? How are we going to help people be able to move quickly through this? And this is, if possible, doing research with assistive tech users. It's really eye-opening and humbling to watch somebody use assistive technology and try to work through your design. First time stuff. And the other thing is that every assistive tech user is going to have a slightly different setup. There's not a monolithic, like, I use this, and everyone who has, like, problem seeing uses this. It's really dialed into individuals. Folks have their flow. They have their software they might use, or just, like, change settings on their devices. And it's yet another reason why overlays aren't particularly effective, because folks typically have their own thing going on their machines when they're accessing a website. So having a little toggle on a website that says, let's make the font bigger. The font's already bigger for these people. They're already using their own settings. So the other important part of doing research with assistive tech users is sharing the knowledge back within the organization. As with any user research task, you really want to make sure you're sharing your takeaways. Even if it's very specific to the product that you're designing, there's going to be things that others can take away. So as the design fidelity increases, as you move towards higher fidelity, mockups, wireframes, prototypes, whatever, the questions that we ask about accessibility should get more specific as well. So these are some example questions that we might ask as we iterate on our visual designs. So we may look at a design and say, okay, we've got a button on this page. Like, how does the user know when they selected that button that it's the thing that they wanted to do is successful? Is there feedback on the page? Is there does the focus on the page change to indicate that something is new? And also, what if it fails? What if something doesn't work? Is there a clear error message that people can then act on? Link text, plain language. Can I scan the page and look at the links alone and understand where the links go? Great question. And do things like the heading hierarchy make sense? Is the page scannable? Is information chunked in a way such that if folks were experiencing a lot of cognitive load, if they would be able to move through a product? So the fidelity increases as your design gets more sharp. So this is a high fidelity wireframe from the Veterans Administration's design system website. So the VA's design system is extremely robust. Highly recommend checking it out. But by this point, we've got some accessibility specific callouts. So I'll point at a couple here because it's really long. We've got our heading hierarchy here indicated. So we've got an H1, the title of the page, and an H2 here, which there's a whole lot here, but but the callouts here indicate, okay, what are the components that we're using here? What's the purpose of each part of this page? And more detailed questions you might ask would be like, okay, so somebody hits submit on this search box. Where does focus go once submit is pressed? Like, how do people know that their form has been submitted? It's okay. Well, focus will move to this showing 1 through 10 of 999 results text, because that will update to show people that the form has been submitted. And it's mobile first. Okay, so we talked about design. Let's talk about code. Who in the house is using design systems? Design system. Okay. Design systems were new to me until a couple of years ago. So they're basically sets of reusable components, whether it's components fully in code or if they're just in design and on a website. And it's a way to reuse components or patterns, or maybe even your content style guide, in a way such that you can just sort of pluck things from your design system instead of having to rewrite everything from scratch every time you want to say, ask for someone's contact information. There might be a pattern in your design system that's like, here are the form fields we use to ask for contact information. Here's how we do it. You don't have to think about it. You can just implement this in your design. Design systems are great because they'll create that shared space for just documentation about design decisions. And they also allow people to prototype more rapidly. For better and for worse, there are some drawbacks of that. But the other benefit is that if you have individual parts of the design system, so say you have an individual component that is for a text input field, or for a drop-down, or an accordion, or a call to action link, that those components, if they're built in code, they can be accessibility tested and then reused in the future. And so that kind of scales up accessibility across your digital properties if you're using the same code for the same individual components over and over. That said, you can combine accessible components inaccessibly. You can put them together in a way that's really confusing, so it's really important to look at the whole thing rather than relying on individual components, accessibility, and saying, we're good to go. There are ways to automate the basics, and some of y'all are probably already doing this. We got Axe Dev Tools from the browser. Whether you pay for it or not, it's a great tool. You may have GitHub workflows that are checking code, maybe checking for programmatic associations, making sure that labels and inputs are associated with each other. For example, doing validation and error handling, just ensuring that the code itself is offering some accessibility features. And there's also plugins in Drupal. I'm assuming there's stuff in core even, maybe, for accessibility, at least like checking if there's alt text on images, maybe doing, checking on plain language for your text editors. Some of this like low level things, these things can be automated at the editor level. Really crucial. And then of course, like issue templates or documentation. If there are ways to create, say, GitHub issue templates for reporting accessibility problems that make it easier for people to be able to report issues more quickly and without having a ton of technical knowledge, that's huge. That increases the number of people who are able to submit bugs, and it also sort of routinizes that reporting and makes it easy to address things as they come up. And then templatized documentation too. We love documentation, but wherever possible, taking some of the think work out of the things that we do a lot helps us to speed ourselves up. So I've got a piece of Swiss cheese, the Swiss cheese emoji on this slide. This is the Swiss cheese analogy that I like to use, which was so prevalent in early COVID times. The many layers of protection increases your chances of being safe. And with accessibility testing, it's similar. If you have more eyes, more folks looking at things, thinking about things, reviewing products, the less likely you are to ship something that's full of accessibility bugs. So having non-comprehensive but low barrier testing available is spreads out some of the work a little bit. It empowers people to feel like they're contributing to accessibility because they are, and also just helps people, if they're iterating on design ideas, to be able to quickly test them and make sure that they would actually be accessible. So some of the lower barrier things might be increase your browser zoom to 400 and see if you can still see everything. Try navigating your page with a keyboard. Do you know where you are and what you could do? Does the tab order make sense? Do a heuristic review. Can I scan the page? Does the heading hierarchy make sense? Do the links make sense out of context? Do I know what the page is, what it's about, where I can go from here? Well, maybe even try VoiceOver, or what's the Windows software?
NVIDIA.
Yes. VoiceOver is Mac, but sort of thinking through those low touch, quick ways to manual test things is really helpful for folks who may not be, again, like accessibility practitioners who can recite WCAG from top to bottom, but who know the things that you need to be looking for. Harvard and GitHub have some really great manual testing checklists that are really helpful. And they're also not super like compliance checklisty, which is important. My job is in governance for our web properties. So I'm also beholden to talk to y'all a little bit about governance and peer review. No, we all know that we can't design alone. There's not like a super genius magical one person can design the perfect solution to things. That's just not how it works. Maybe that's how we thought it worked 30 years ago, but it's really not possible to design something that's going to be effective alone and in isolation. So getting peer review on our designs, talking to other folks, even people who may not be accessibility practitioners, but who might be outside of your context, who aren't familiar with the thing that you're working on, and who could come into it with fresh eyes, can be super helpful. Whether it's formal or informal check-ins, whether there's a formal governance process, which is what we have in my organization, where you come through and meet with us and then we review it and then tell you what you need to fix before it goes live. Or if it's something less formal. And we all know that the product's lifespan is like 80% after you launch, 90%. Like we think so much in terms of like, okay, this project is 100% done. We finally moved it into production, but its lifespan after that is like, 20 times longer than we spent building it. So regular audits coming back through, looking at what we've done, making sure that forms still work. I realized my form doesn't work on my website a few months ago because somebody tried to email me and they couldn't get through. So it's like, oh, that's freshly not working. That's exciting. So just paving the path to be able to review, get feedback as much as possible, Swiss cheese, and to document and triage issues using the templates and just make it lower the bar as much as possible. And I wanted to end with this quote from Alice Wong because she just passed away yesterday. She's the author of Disability Justice, and so much of her work has lit the fire under my ass to even start thinking about this. But advocacy is not just a task for charismatic individuals or high-profile community organizers. Advocacy is for all of us. And I also had to include this print of the cast iron pan and biscuits. We rise together because when biscuits cook, if they're touching each other, they actually rise higher. Pro tip for the next time you make biscuits. And that is it. I ended a little early, so I'm excited about a conversation. Don't have any questions? Oh. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So what does accessibility look like in your organizations? Do you have like the one person who is doing all the things, or what does it look like where you're working?
It's me, but the one lead, but I'm not the one person, but I'm the one lead. Mm-hmm. But we try very much to educate the whole organization. We try very hard.
Yeah. Are you in terms of like internal, that community of learning, what does that look like where you are? Like said you're having events, so
we want to expand it more. Actually last year we were gonna do more and other things. Life happened. Yeah. But we wanted to, now it's more almost one by one. If somebody turns something into us to put on the web and it's not already not accessible, we'll go back and say, hey, you need to tweak this, you need to tweak that.
Yeah.
So it's more one-on-one as opposed to any kind of organized. Or we're trying to get to the organized stage.
Yeah, it's cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Excuse me, hey everyone. I'm Nicole. I work for Tyler Technologies, and we have an enterprise content management system for the state of Rhode Island, which Jason had developed for us along with the OOF team. and had, developed with accessibility in mind. So we have reusable components, paragraph types that help users to build their site in an accessibility way. But we do have some agencies that like to go a little rogue because of their preference, what they think is right, but not necessarily what the citizen coming to the site. So we're trying to work with them right now. Jay just gave a presentation and highlighted some things, not specifically pointing anybody out, but just to say like, okay, we have compliance coming up and these are some things that you can do, to not change what we've already implemented because, he gave examples where, OS wanted their font size to be smaller than the rest of the system, the library.
Typical librarians.
So he recognized that maybe after 5 years, we could revisit the look of the font and feel, but he gave a good example of showing how it breaks the user experience if they want to use those accessibility tools to increase or decrease the size of the text. It causes it to break completely. So, yeah.
So that system embodied just about everything I've ever written or spoken about in responsive typography and accessibility tools, and it was an amazing thing. Like when we did it, there's a drop down on every single site on the state on that platform that allows you to customize the font size, the line height, and the word spacing, because all of those things can make a huge impact on the usability of the site and also reader comprehension. So if you're dyslexic, if you suffer from crowding, these things will really help you understand stuff. But that's not to say that defaults don't change. Because like where I work now, I work at Chewy. We have 3/4 of our traffic on a small screen, and we recently did some research in the use of our apps on both Android and iOS, and 50% of the people that use these apps have their text set to a larger than default size. And so if you pair that with our demographics, like it is clearly not just people my age and wearing, it's across the board. And the same thing with dark mode. And so like all of these things, like we have no idea what our users are really like, what's their happy place in their set of defaults. And I think it's a constant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Too much screen time we all have.
Yeah.
Now it's like everything has to change, right? It's interesting.
But I think it's also it is also a preference thing.
Yeah.
We like I'll be honest, I imposed what I thought my sensible defaults were on the typography for that platform.
Yeah.
And at the time maybe that was fine, maybe now it should change. But it is one of those things where we do always have to kind of question our own biases, our own defaults.
Can I ask you, what tool do you use to measure to know 50% are increasing the list?
So we are fortunate enough that we have engineers who can actually put that, like basically look at that data in the usage of our native apps. So it's not something that we're easily able to tell from web users, but it is something that we're easily able to track with our native apps. And so if you do have native apps and have a team that develops them for you, talk to them about it, because you'll learn a lot about what the sort of the default behaviors are, and you can kind of extrapolate from there to your mobile web users, because they will likely have the pattern probably holds true. That's a reasonable assumption, and that will kind of give you a sense, and that it shouldn't matter, but it is some of that carrot and stick stuff that you can employ with your organization to say, well, and that's what we do. Like, hey, we're trying to go through and audit, 20 different applications that make up Chewy.com and deal with font scaling across all of them. And this is part of the discussion we can have with that team or those teams and say, well, these are the biggest issues that we found. And here's where we think you should look to find them, and kind of go from there. Because it is, you have to find the hook that will make it matter to the person you're talking to at the time. And this is like any design discussion is the same thing. I'm sorry.
I know, I think it also
We did
like
an audit recently, and, you know, that's what we wanted to do, that audit, to kind of see what was going on and see what could be addressed and where everybody's, you know, thoughts were and everything, so.
moving target.
Mhm.
I hope everyone will indulge me in a shameless plug.
Yes.
I'm on the support team at DubBot. DubBot is a web governance tool, similar to Site Improve, but less expensive and
Ooh.
easier to use. We also have a Drupal module and a WordPress plugin for easy integration. And if anyone would like to know more, we are a sponsor of the conference, and I was happy to talk.
I should put you in my slide instead of, because Site Improve was just, I mean, my former employer had used it, I was like, this is whatever, this is fine.
I work in state government and a lot of them use Site Improve except for where they've raised their prices because of all of the like legislation going in next year. So they all just like took advantage for this cash grab.
We use
So-
Site Improve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool. It's awesome. But yeah, a lot of them are like, we had to cut it. So now we have nothing.
That was a big part of like when we were working on the state government platform, they were using it and we were able to learn a ton about
It's
how
great
our platform
tool.
was
Yeah.
performing. And thankfully, a lot of that then got built in. So
Yeah. This
it's
is why we use tools,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
help us, we
Yeah.
automate when we can, yes.
The editorially module, Editoria 11Y, has a
Ah.
is an amazing how much of a subset of what Site Improve does that it does. Like we've got Site Improve reports from a state client, but we're putting editorially on all our sites, and it's for this client, it basically covers everything that Site Improve was telling them anyway. So definitely the Editoria 11Y module.
We've been
is-
looking at
is
that one
great.
too.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and again, like Swiss cheese, right, we use multiple
Yeah.
tools to do the
There's
thing.
no one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely, this is all super helpful stuff.
I think for us too, because we do state government stuff, there's a lot of like re-education for the content editors too, and trying to reach them all, especially around documents like PDFs. That's like a whole another thing.
I shudder to go through the.
Oh, and it's always like where it starts with the word also. It's like always governments love tables. So like the tables, it's like, oh no, and then trying to remediate these PDFs, and a lot of them for some of our state governments have been sealed because they go to like legislations and stuff. So their site will always get pinged for this like accessibility, like non-compliance, and it's just insane. So it's like goes down to like the user of like, these are the guidelines. Before we put anything on the web, make sure these are like the checklists you're going through to make sure it's gonna be compliant with, and accessible for all users.
Something that you said at the very beginning really resonated about this is just how we do things, like getting to that point throughout. Similar late 1900s, starting to work on this stuff. And through every iteration of how we work, there's this inflection point where people charge more for it, and then it just like, well, no, this is just what we do. So responsive design,
Yep.
was one of those things
Exactly.
where people would treat it as an upcharge, an option, a maybe stretch goal. And then the organization I was working for at the time, we made the decision that no, like this is the cutoff. Like everything we make now will be responsive, and that's just what our baseline will be. And on our so I work on the design system team, and we have a UX engineering team that works with us on the design side, and then we have a guy who used to work for the W3C in accessibility and is kind of our he's like kind of our guy, but he's one guy. So everything that we do is meant to try and scale that knowledge and make it easier to do the right thing than the wrong one.
Exactly.
But that's always our take is no, this isn't a checkbox. This is just how we work.
Yeah.
And these are the things that you have to do. And then +1 for like the public channel and Slack for people to ask questions, and it actually does become a place where people help each other.
Yeah.
That's been great.
Well, we're at time. I've appreciated the conversation, and if you want to stick around and chat some more, you're definitely welcome to, but I'll let you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.